Augustus, Octavian, Imperator. He was Rome's first emperor, an adopted son of Julius Caesar. His rule began at a time of great peace called the Pax Romana, or Pax Augusta, and the exceptional quality of his rule made the Roman Senate wish subsequent emperors to be more fortunate than Augustus and better than Trajan. And although the life of the first emperor is often imagined to be full of grandeur, fame, glory, and immense wealth, Augustus was known and wished to be remembered to his contemporaries and throughout history as someone who truly embodied the Roman Republican ideal. He did all he could to ensure that the next Caesar had everything he needed to rule the empire well and keep it from splitting apart. It is indeed fortunate for the Western world that a just ruler such as Augustus prevailed in becoming the first emperor, rather than a hot-headed tyrant and womanizer Mark Antony, who surely would have torn the empire apart. Unlike his illustrious future, he had a quite modest beginning. He was born Gaius Octavius Thurinus, just a few steps away from the Roman Forum, to an equestrian family. When he was old enough to don the toga, he wished to join his uncle Caesar in Hispania. But on his way there he was shipwrecked, and after coming ashore, he, with just a handful of companions, crossed hostile territory to Caesar's camp, which is said to have impressed his uncle greatly. At this point on, Caesar allowed him to share his carriage. When they were back in Rome, Caesar visited the Vestal Virgins and deposited a new will, naming Octavian as his heir. Not too long after this, Caesar was murdered on the Ides of March by a group of senators. Rather than fleeing Italy in fear for his life, Octavian immediately traveled to Rome to ascertain what kind of political and financial fortunes that was rightfully his as Caesar's heir. Octavian soon adopted his uncle's name, Gaius Julius Caesar, and actively worked to take his uncle's place in the political arena, but we will refer to him as Octavian for the time being. Octavian knew that his uncle's greatest strength lied with his legions, and soon began to introduce himself to his veterans of the Gallic campaigns as Caesar's heir. His presence, as well as newly acquired funds from Caesar's preparation of war against the Parthian Empire, attracted many of Caesar's veterans, and soon he had gathered a substantial private army. Upon entering Rome, he found Mark Antony in an uneasy truce with his uncle's assassins. Being the chief lieutenant of Caesar, Antony was trying to amass power for himself and refused to cooperate with Octavian, who demanded that all of Caesar's property and money be handed over to him. But Antony was already losing support in Rome after he objected to deifying Caesar. And at the end of his term as consul, he fled Rome in fear of Octavian and his legions, and formed an alliance with Lepidus, another man from Caesar's faction. These three men would go on to form the Second Triumvirate, carving out the Roman Republic in three. This arrangement was supported by law passed by the plebs, unlike the unofficial First Triumvirate formed by Pompey, Julius Caesar, and Crassus. The triumvirs then set in motion proscriptions in which they drove out and or killed all of their enemies, seizing their property for their own gain. Although they were masters of Rome, they did not yet own much property, and some were killed only because of their wealth. The only thing that stood in their way was now the rebel forces led by Brutus and Cassius, Caesar's assassins, who had built up their base of power in Greece. Octavian and Antony's forces engaged them near Philippi in Macedonia, and defeated Brutus and Cassius, both of whom later committed suicide rather than be captured. But the destruction of their common enemy did not end hostilities. Three men could not be masters of Rome at the same time, and an arrangement was made where they divided up the republic among themselves. Octavian claimed Gaul, Hispania, and Italia, while Antony traveled to Egypt and allied himself with Queen Cleopatra, the former lover of Julius Caesar, and mother of Caesar's infant son, Caesarion. Lepidus was left with the province of Africa. But there was another man of importance that they had failed to appease, and that was Pompeius, the son of the former Pompey the Great. Pompeius was based in the islands of Sicily and Sardinia, and commanded a large navy, which in turn allowed him to exercise control over the Mediterranean Sea. This prompted him to take on the name Neptuni Filius, or the son of Neptune. Due to a botched marital alliance with Octavian, Pompeius threatened to cut off all grain shipments to Italy in an effort to cause a massive famine. Octavian eventually capitulated and gave him control over the island of Corsica, the Peloponnese, and promised him a future consular position in Rome. This fourth man into the politics of the triumvirs had to be dealt with, and Octavian sought help from Antony and Lepidus. Antony supplied Octavian with 120 ships to attack Pompeius, while Octavian agreed to send 20,000 legionaries to Antony for his war against Parthia. With preparations complete, Octavian and Lepidus launched a joint operation against Pompeius in Sicily. They were successful in destroying his entire navy, and Pompeius fled to the east with his remaining forces, where he was subsequently captured and executed by Antony's forces. As Octavian and Lepidus accepted the surrender of Pompeius' troops, Lepidus made a fatal mistake of trying to claim Sicily for himself and ordering Octavian to leave. This, however, presented Octavian with the perfect chance to get rid of Lepidus. He enticed Lepidus' troops with the promise of money, and they ended up defecting to Octavian, causing Lepidus to surrender and be sent off to exile. The Republic now had two masters, and with the uneasy balance of the triumvirate gone, the battle for the sole rule of Rome was now inevitable. While Octavian's campaigns against Pompeius was successful, Antony's war with Parthia proved disastrous. In order to gain the support of Cleopatra, Antony divorced his wife Octavia, the sister of Octavian, which ended all excuses of familial ties and friendship. Antony also began to show his qualities when he started installing his sons as rulers of eastern kingdoms, and revealing in his will that he would give away Roman-conquered territories as kingdoms for his sons to rule, and designated Alexandria as the site for a tomb for him and his queen. Antony was no longer Roman, and he was more Egyptian, and the Senate officially revoked his powers as consul and declared war on him and Cleopatra. Antony and Cleopatra's forces were decisively defeated in the Battle of Actium on the western coast of Greece, and Octavian pursued their forces all the way to Alexandria, which drove Antony and Cleopatra to suicide. Antony fell on his own sword and was taken by soldiers back to Alexandria, where he died in Cleopatra's arms. Cleopatra died soon after, reputedly by the venomous bite of an asp or by poison. Octavian had exploited his position as Caesar's heir to further his own political career, and he was well aware of the dangers in allowing another person to do the same. He, therefore, decided that two Caesars are one too many, and ordered Caesarion, the son of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, to be killed, while sparing Cleopatra's children by Antony, with the exception of Antony's older son. Octavian had previously shown little mercy to surrendered enemies and acted in ways that had proven unpopular with the Roman people. Yet he was given credit for pardoning many of his opponents after the Battle of Actium. After the defeat of Antony and Cleopatra, Octavian made a show of returning full power to the Roman Senate, although in reality he controlled the Republic through a web of clients and patronage. The facade of Republican rule was well maintained, and Octavian, now newly minted as Augustus by the Senate, even used his personal fortunes for public works for the good of the Republic. His reign marked a time of peace Rome hasn't seen since Sulla and Marius vied for power in Rome. During this time, Augustus promoted the ideal of a superior Roman civilization, with the task of ruling the known world. An impulse for expansionism was popular with citizens of all classes in Rome. By the end of his reign, the armies of Augustus had conquered northern Spain and Portugal, modern-day Switzerland, Bavaria, Austria and the mountain regions, Slovenia, Albania, Croatia and Hungary, Serbia and the Balkans, and had extended the borders of the Africa province to the east and south. Judea was added to the province of Syria when he deposed King Herod Archelaus, the son of King Herod the Great mentioned in the Bible, and he also annexed Egypt, which provided immense revenue for the empire, which he used to pay for public building projects and games. Towards the end of his life, Augustus made sure that the transition to the next emperor would go smoothly. He named his stepson Tiberius Claudius as his heir, and had made significant preparations for a smooth transition in power. His famous last words were, "Have I played the part well? Then applaud as I exit." Publicly, though, his last words were, "Behold, I found Rome of clay and leave her to you of marble." While his long and steady rule of the empire played a key factor in his success, he has also been subjected to criticism throughout the ages for subverting republican rule. But as we covered earlier, his ultimate victory over Mark Antony, who very well would have plunged the empire into chaos, left a lasting legacy of peace, enshrining his memory in the political ethos of the imperial age as a paradigm of the good emperor. Every emperor of Rome adopted his name, Caesar Augustus, and prayed to be like him, although an emperor more worthy would be few and far between.